Welcome to the Luke Jaeger Show. I am here today with special guest Colin Davis. He is the guitarist and founder of the death metal band Vile and audio engineer of his cell phone company Imperial Mastering. Colin, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. It's great to see you again. It's been a while, and I'm happy to be here.
Could we start back to 1996 when you kind of were getting the band together? How did you meet Matt and Juan, and how did that all come together in those years?
Right. So Matt and I had a prior band called Entropy together, and we put out a demo in 1994. Mm-hmm. And actually, Aaron Strong, who later joined Vile, was the singer in that band. And I had found Matt through like a classified one ads. And then Aaron was a friend of mine who just ran with other friends, and I was friends with Aaron and his friend Mark, and then so there's like two different crews really. There was the crew from Concord, California, and then there was kind of a crew from Oakland. And the Oakland crew was Thanatopsis and some other guys. Skin Lab were down there, and so I practiced with Entropy down in Oakland, and had some connections down there. But I lived in Concord, and so I had some musician friends up there. And when Entropy broke up, because the drummer had ended up committing suicide, actually, really tragically. A good drummer named Uranio Hunter. And after that happened, me and Matt and Aaron were kind of just like, all right, well, we'll try to do something again soon. And I started looking for a drummer. And then I started hanging out with Aaron and this guy, Mark Varian, and just hanging out over at Mark Varian's band practice. And it was Mark that had a band called Lords of Chaos that Juan Urtiaga was the singer of. So that's how I met Juan. And then their bass player left, and I said, why don't you ask Aaron to play bass? I mean, he's a guitar player, but he could play bass. And they said, okay. And they had Aaron playing bass for a while. And then they said, well, what about you, Colin? I mean, you don't have anything to do. Why don't you be the second guitar player? There was a guy named Andre in the band. And I said, all right, I guess I'll learn the songs, because me and Aaron didn't have anything to do at the time. So we joined Lords of Chaos. And I think we played a couple shows with them before that ended up breaking up, because I think it was with Juan. Juan basically kind of realized, hey, wait a minute, this band is getting more professional now. We got Aaron, we have Colin, and Juan was getting into recording and buying recording equipment, and I was already into that. And so we started recording the band, and the whole thing kind of started to get more serious, and my whole band manager attitude started coming in. We started scrutinizing things. And I think for Mark, the drummer, he was just more about having a good time and didn't really like that. And so we started getting into arguments and stuff. And at one point, it was just kind of just had to happen, I guess. He just got pissed off at us for being too controlling. And he had the lease on the band practice space. And Mark kicked us all out of his unit. Said, you guys screw off, go do something somewhere else. So we got another unit across the street and started looking for a drummer, and then that's where and then another guy named Tilo Fellinger, who's the sound guy for Exodus and other bands. He lived in Fairfield, and he knew about Mike Hamilton, the guy who eventually became the drummer for Vile, and he said, "Oh, well, you should call Mike. Mike is he's the double bass player around." And we're like, oh, okay, we didn't even know the whole Fairfield crew. Eventually, we were able to meet up with Mike. I had a conversation with him on the phone, and he invited me and Juan to come up to his band practice place. and where him and his buddy Jim from high school had a space somewhere, and they were just jamming, kind of just whatever. They didn't have a band really. Mike played in some other bands. And Juan and I went up there, and we immediately clicked with them. And Mike was just really great, just right off. He was already as good or better than Uranio Hunter was, and much better than Mark was. And so we just started writing a song right there on the first band practice, and Jim had some riffs and I had some riffs, and we put together this song in a couple practices called Processions of Destruction, which is it was on the first demo. It's on the Vile Rare Tracks CD that Hammerheart put out, and I don't think it's anywhere else, but we wrote that song. And once that kind of came together, we're just like this. We were all just like, oh man, we all sound great together. So we just all started committing, and Juan had his recording studio, Trident Studios, and so they started coming down a couple times a week. And then, but the problem there was Andre, who was the guitarist for Lords of Chaos, was kind of kicking back, waiting for me and Juan to find a drummer. And then he would be back in the loop again. But once we found Mike, and he came with Jim, and Mike said, I really want to bring Jim with me. Me and Juan were just like, okay, it sucks, but we're gonna have to tell Andre that we can't do it with him. So Andre, that was disappointing to Andre, but he went off and formed another band called Ebola. And I think they put out a CD. I think Juan recorded that CD. And so that was it. And so Vile started practicing at Juan's studio upstairs. And so it was, and then we brought Matt back in because okay, how did it work? So we had Jim and Mike from Fairfield, guitars and drums. We had me and Juan, guitars and vocals. And then we didn't have room for Aaron because we had Jim. And so I called Matt again, my bass player from Entropy, and he came in and joined and played bass. And then when we recorded our first demo, Aaron came in and did solos because Jim was just a rhythm player. And that was kind of how all the friends kind of worked out, how to collaborate together. And it was just, that's kind of how that came together. So there's I think maybe a rundown of how Vile came to be in 96 or so, 95, 96.
Yeah, I remember I saw you guys, I think it was 1998 at an old club called Bojangles in Sacramento. And I was actually standing right in front of you the whole show. It was kind of, I never knew, like it was kind of ironic that, a few years later it'd be sharing the stage. But
yeah, I don't remember that gig, actually. I think we played the Boardwalk a couple times. But okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't remember who else was on the bill, but yeah, what I liked about you guys is just the really good riffs and the groove, and
right,
just great production and pretty much the whole 9 yards. Yeah,
the groove thing was, I always had like an instinct for riffs to have groove, but Mike Hamilton had this. He naturally just played that way. And he just naturally played like just kind of behind the beat, just kind of, just grooving. And so it was just a good formula.
Yeah. And then, so right around after Stench of the Deceased, how are things kind of picking up? You guys are obviously getting some good tours, and you started a mastering company. How did all this, what was kind of going on in this timeline?
Yeah, there's a few stages altogether there, but so, okay, well, so the demo, we put out one demo, and so let's say we put that out in, I think we put that out in the spring of '96, and then we went to the Milwaukee Metal Fest, because the Milwaukee Metal Fest was like the central festival for death metal and extreme metal in America in the '90s. So we traveled out there. I don't know if we didn't play or anything. We just went out there to just check out the scene and to pass out demos. And we actually ran into George Fisher, who was in Monstrosity at the time, later in Cannibal Corpse. We ran it. No, he wasn't in Monstrosity. He was, okay, here's the deal. We ran into George Fisher in the Milwaukee Metal Fest. This is going to be '96. Maybe it's '97. I'm not sure on that. And we go, George, can we get a picture with you? And we give him our tape. And he looks at the tape, and it says Vile, right? And the album that Cannibal Corpse had just put out was called Vile. Mm. And that's a whole story unto itself as to how did we name ourselves after the Cannibal Corpse album, or did we, or was that intentional? That we could talk about that. But so he just thought, oh, this is cool, Vile. And he posed with us, me and Mike and him in the picture, still have that picture around. And then the story goes is that they threw that tape into the box on the bus. And him and Alex would, when they were driving around, they would listen to the tapes that people would give them at the shows, like other bands, to just see what was out there in the world and support other bands. And they were like, let's save this Vile one for last, because it was like the same name as their album. And they told us later, they said, yeah, we waited for last. We put this one on, and then we were just totally stoked when we heard that demo, and they just kept on spinning the demo. And then the next time we saw them, which was, I don't know how, probably 6 months later or something at a show, they were like, oh, you're the Vile guys. We play your tape all the time. Do you remember? You gave us, and we went, yeah, totally. Here, have some shirts. And we gave them some shirts, and then they started wearing our shirts live and in band photos and stuff. And so once that started happening, then magazines started calling us for interviews, and they're like, who's this band, Vile? Because we ended up having a pretty good logo, and which is also another story, because that comes from Johnzig. And so that kind of is how that helped us, is those guys promoting us. It also helped that, yeah, we did some tours in the early days, and we're still on like '97, '98. We did the first demo, 3 songs. Then we did a second demo in '98, 3 songs. We put out a new tape with both demos on each side. We went to the Milwaukee Metal Fest every year for like 4 or 5 years. And then we recorded Stench of the Deceased in '99, which was basically just a re-recording of 5 of the 6 songs that we had on the demos, and then 3 new ones. And at that point, we had changed our tuning. We had changed from C-sharp tuning down to A. I think we're at A. B, A. We were A. And then subsequent to that, for the second album, we tuned up a half step because it was just too sludgy. So we remained at B flat. But so that's how. So okay, we recorded Stench of the Deceased. We went back to the Metal Fest, and I think at that point, Relapse Records found out about us because people started talking about us, and Andy Hosner was the A&R guy who was into death metal, and Relapse, I think, had Nile at the time, but they hadn't really gone into their whole death metal phase. It was Andy that helped them do that. He signed He signed us, he signed Origin, he signed Cephalic Carnage, he signed probably, I'm not sure how many others, maybe a couple others. And so Relapse started going this death metal direction. And they invited us to play. I think this would have been 2000, 99 or 2000, I think this was 99. They invited us to play on the Relapse stage at the Milwaukee Metal Fest. We played that. Then they had another festival, like only 6 months later, I think, in San Antonio, Texas, called November to Dismember. And I think that's also 99, maybe it's 2000. And we played that. And then we played again. So we played the Relapse stage like 3 times, and that helped. And this is all, with the original songs, and then we're doing some touring. We're doing we're going to Texas and back. I think we did that 2 times with Deeds of Flesh van tour. We went up and down the West Coast with Deeds of Flesh and Immolation. I think Immolation had a tour they pulled us on. We did that. We did a lot of Bay Area shows. We did some LA shows. So we were just kind of playing around the West Coast, and we do these little stints to Texas and back. And then we had been signed to Relapse, and then Relapse didn't want to re-release the first album. They wanted to put out the next album, which was Depopulate. But then, but that's around the time Mike and Jim quit the band. First, Juan kicked Jim out of the band for being out of control, and then Jim joined Deeds of Flesh, and then Mike ended up quitting Vile in the middle of the pre-production for the recording of Depopulate, and that set us back. And in the meantime, Relapse went in a different direction. They dropped us, and so it's just like there's all these different phases of the band and then going into the Depopulate, where we ended up getting Tyson Jupin, and that's like the next phase. So like up to getting signed to Relapse, and then before Mike and Jim quit, that's the first, what is that, 96, 97, 98, 99. It's like the first 4 years of the band. That's like one whole phase. That's the original lineup and all that. And then we moved into the Depopulate phase with Tyson, and that's kind of the next phase.
Yeah, no, yeah, a lot of details I wasn't aware of there. And then I guess we'll kind of keep on with the band timeline, but I'll get back to asking about the mastering too. But I guess further in, so Depopulate, New Age of Chaos. You guys also went to Japan for a brief time, I believe, a brief tour. Yeah, well, I should probably just keep going on the timeline just for people who would watch this, because I think maybe most people that would watch this would probably be people that would know Vile, but yeah. I mean, these stories are around, but might as well just kind of put it together again. And so then we went, and so now we're in. Okay, so now it's just me, Juan, and Matt, and we need a drummer, and it's 2001, and what's happening is Tyson, we found Tyson through Derek Boyer, who is the bassist for Deprecated at the time. Now he's in Suffocation. But we knew Derek through Deeds of Flesh. And so we knew Derek. I don't think we were signed to the Deeds of Flesh label at that point, but around then, I think we did do that. After Relapse dropped us, I think Deeds of Flesh started their own label. They bought it from some other guys, a label called Unique Leader.
and they started, Eric and Jacoby started, and Mike, when he was in, they started running the label. And they offered to sign us. We said yes to that. And then I'm trying to get this right here. We signed on Unique Leader, but they didn't have any European distribution. And so we said, okay, crap, we're going to have to look for a European label also. And so I started sending tapes around and contacting people, and I contacted Laurent from Listenable Records. And this is a French label, pretty like a medium-sized label, a really good label actually. And they had some bands. I mean, they had Soilwork was on there, who later became huge. They had a lot of good bands, and he had already heard the demo. He already liked Vile from years prior, and he thought we were on Relapse, and so he never contacted us. But once he found out we weren't, and he also didn't have good North American distribution, so it was perfect. So I said, okay, Listenable did Europe and the rest of the world, and then Unique Leader did North America, and that was the kind of deal. And then the idea was, we have a new album, Depopulate. We're still writing, doing pre-production for it right now, and but that will be the next album. And we did 2-album deal with Listenable, and just a one album at a time deal with Unique Leader. And so, and Listenable agreed to re-release Stench of the Deceased with some new packaging and remastering. Okay, so that all started, but they waited to put that out. So anyway, so we're re-signed now to these labels, and I had found Tyson Jupin through Derek, and I started traveling down to San Diego once a month. I drive down there. I borrowed my friend's pickup truck. I put my rig in the back, and I would drive to San Diego once a month, and I'd stay Friday, Saturday. I'd arrive Friday night, stay Saturday, Sunday, maybe leave Monday or something. And then we would just work out in the garage. We would just work out one song. We would practice what we worked out the month before, and then we would start a new song. And in the meantime, I was taking riffs and I was working on them on my own. And then I'd bring them down to Tyson, and that was the goal. Is every weekend was to put together one new song. And I think I did that 6 times. And then I added a couple, or maybe I did that 5 times. And then I added 3 songs that had already been pre-produced with Mike Hamilton. And so there we had 8 songs. We later put like an instrumental to make it a little longer. And this is going to be 2001. 9/11 happens. That kind of screws up the world, but for us, it's still like, okay, we're just in the recording studio right now. So we just went through with that and recorded that album. And then there's all these, there's also stories that go along with this from the engineering point of view of how me and Juan, we were the engineers, how our engineering, progressed and advanced through that process, because we're really, we're recording other bands, but we're, really testing our skills. We're really challenging ourselves, I should say, with the recording of Vile. So we put out Depopulate, and we gave that to the 2 labels, and that's going to be 2002 when that comes out. And then we start playing. I don't remember where we played in the US around that time, but how did I get over it? We did a tour with that lineup of Europe in 2003, and it was Vile was the headliner. It was Vile, Disavowed from Holland, Mangled from Holland, and Spawn of Possession from Sweden. And what had happened was I had gone separately to Holland in 1999 to go to the Dynamo Festival with some Bay Area bands, Skin Lab and 40 Grit. And I had just gone there just for the experience. Yeah, I want to go. I'm going to go with you guys. And I went out there, and I had met some Dutch people, and I maintained some connections there. And I had gone over there just to, vacation or mess around or whatever in 2002. And I was hanging out with the guys in Mangled, and they were trying to put together a tour, and they were like, well, why don't we just have Vile headline this tour for us? I said, Vile? I said, we're not a headliner. I mean, we just, and they're like, no, you are a headliner. And I was like, really? And they said, yeah, we think you are. I was like, okay. And so, yeah, we put it together. They put together the tour. They had some guys that have been booking tours, working on it, not like professional agencies, but some guys. And I came home and I said, hey, they want us to headline this tour, guys. Do you want to do this? We're all going to pay for our own way, and let's go over there and do this. And there was a lot of hassle in getting people to commit to it and stuff, but we did. And that's its own story. But we toured Europe. I think we played like 28 dates and went all over the place in 2003. And then after that, and we got Reno Keelerike, Reno from what was his band called? Ex Mortem, yeah, to play drums, because Tyson couldn't come with us because he was in college and had classes or something. We went out there, we did that. And then after that, Aaron quit the band, and it kind of fell apart from there, and I kind of put it back together. And then I think that's when we're not at Japan yet. We're in 2004 now. That's when I found you, is for the Cannibal Corpse tour in 2004. Yeah, right?
Yeah. I kind of jumped way ahead with the Japan thing.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's a cool credential to say we played Japan, but it was only 5 shows. I mean, that's actually a lot for bands to play Japan. I think all you really need to do is, it's like it's play Tokyo. I mean, it's where a lot of bands just kind of go through Australia, and then they just go over to Japan, play Tokyo, maybe Osaka City, and then they get out of there, and maybe they do Malaysia or Philippines or something. But so we had toured 2003 Europe. We've been doing these metal fests. Listenable was putting out the record in Europe, and they were getting us good publicity. We were getting in European magazines. We're getting good reviews. And Unique Leader was putting out Depopulate, and both labels were doing really well with the album. And I don't even really know what the total album sales were, but I know that they were very happy with the sales and just the whole thing and the touring and everything. So that was going well, but some band members were starting to peel off, and so because that's kind of just, some bands, there's like a formula, and they have these members, and they're like a family, and they stick together through thick and thin, and it's just like a bond, a family bond, and it's a Led Zeppelin or a Beatles or whatever, and it stays the same. And then other bands end up just peeling apart all over the place, and there's 1 or 2 band members that hold it together. And so for a long time, it was me and Juan that held it together, but then even Juan peeled off and decided to have a family and just run his recording studio, and he didn't want to have to constantly be, interrupted by, let's, do this tour, that tour. So he ended up peeling off, and this is all around 2004. And at that time, when Vile was membership was falling apart, I got a call from Eric Rutan, Hate Eternal, and he had been offered a tour with Cannibal Corpse, but he couldn't do it. And so he told Alex, call Vile, and why don't you have them? And Alex was like, that's a great idea. Yeah, we love those guys. Are they available? And he goes, well, I don't know, but you should call them. And then Eric calls me in advance and he says, I just was talking to Alex Webster. He's going to call you. So, and he was just like, dude, you better do this tour. And yeah, man, you got to do this tour, you know. And I was like, okay. And I said, but I don't have, I don't have a band right now. Everybody's walking off the set, you know, everybody's flaking off. And he goes, whatever, man, you better put it together because this is the best opportunity you've ever had. So you better take this tour. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it work. And so I knew I called Reno, and Reno agreed. And then I needed, I had Matt. I didn't have a singer. I didn't have a lead guitar player. And for the singer, I knew to call James Lee from Origin, because Origin had recorded their second album in 2002, and they had called me to produce the album. And I had gone out to Racine, Wisconsin to produce that with them. And so I had seen how James Lee came into the studio totally prepared and did all his 9 songs in 2 days. He just, boom, just cut it, just like a pro. And he sounded great and everything. And I think I might have seen them live at least once. And so I was like, I should call James. I think, I'll just have to call James. For guitar player, for you played lead guitar on that tour, and I'm trying to think, do you remember how, you tell me, how did I find you?
I think it was online for sure. I think you guys put up an ad. And
oh, okay, yeah, it was on MySpace or something.
You know what? I think it might have been the Seattle Metal online page. You were kind of reaching out all over the place, and I think it was on there. This is a long time ago, back in but
this is 2004, right? Let's see, that tour happened in
we
March,
met
April.
In 2003 on the I think online, and then and then you came up here to Alki Beach in Seattle, and you taught
stayed
me
at your house for a night or something.
Yeah, a few nights. Yeah.
A few nights. Yeah. We worked out songs.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. And then I think I just joined the tour like maybe a week before the tour started, and just rehearsed with the band.
Oh yeah, you. Where did we rehearse? At my place?
Yeah, you lived in Concord, I think, but your studio was
in Pacheco.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right. So Juan had his studio at this business park in these roll-up door warehouses. Juan had his studio and had that since 99, I think he got it, 98. And then I rented one a few doors down, and I started building a mastering studio. The main reason is because the band practice for Vile was interfering with Juan's recording business. And so a space opened up, and I ended up renting that space. And for a while I was living there and playing there, and I started building my own studio there and doing some recording and stuff there. So that was happening. And and then we were practicing. That was the Vile practice spot for a while. So yeah, you must have come out there, and we did all that. And Reno was there, right? I mean, did he show up a few days? I think he might have showed up like a week early also.
No, he was there. I vividly remember us just walking around in San Francisco. And
yeah, Reno's a lot of fun, and so I still stay in touch with him on Facebook. He's a great guy, actually. And I mean, we had drama with him in the early days. It was just everybody was immature. But yeah, I think he's great. And it's crazy how he's kind of an athlete, really. He kind of approaches drums like an athlete. And to him, it was all about, I mean, it was really about, you know, conquering this genre. And he ended up playing in Cannibal Corpse. No, not Cannibal Corpse. He played in Hate Eternal. He played in Dimmu Borgir. He played in some other bands, and he kind of, as a hired gun kind of a guy, I think he satisfied himself, and then he went off to like motorcycle and BMX and like downhill bicycle racing and stuff like that, other extreme stuff.
One thing I respected about you, though, is you know, in that situation where you had to hire band members to join, you know, to do a tour, to kind of do something last minute like that, but you were very professional, you know, and I respect that band leadership in the sense of, you know, whatever it takes. And, you know, because I've had a lot of bad experiences being in bands where I was not paid right, I was mistreated, and you were very...
Did I pay you?
No, you were...
I think I did. I think I remember everybody got paid at the hotel rooms. Everybody got. I remember saying, I think we agreed, or I just sort of said, everybody has certain amount of bills, and you had the least amount of bills, so I think you got less money. It was kind of a communist way of doing it, but yeah.
No. What I'm saying though is that I look back and I really respect how professional you were. It wasn't about who got paid more or anything. It was just the fact that you were so tenacious, and you just did whatever you had as a band leader.
Oh yeah,
you did what you had to do to make your team happy, and I respect that. I'm just saying that I've had a lot of experiences that were not like that, whether it be local bands or bands that I've recorded on albums for, and they just, you know, kind of a lot of lack of professionalism, and I'm giving you credit for that. I'm not saying
well, thanks. I mean, we could go in this direction for a minute in the whole subject of being in a band, or being a band leader, running a band, and professionalism in general, and all of that. So, okay, it turns out that some of my natural talent to be a band leader comes from my mother's side of the family. My mother's father was a jazz musician, and from New Orleans, and he and a band manager. And so he for years, he put together jazz bands in Asia, actually. He would go around in the Philippines and Japan, mainly the Philippines, Japan, Hong Kong, and find, this is in the 50s, the best Asian musicians that were playing all the good songs, you know, all the whatever the standards were at the time that everybody wanted to hear. And he could put together a great band that would be a great band without that, you know, that they would, you know, it was, how are you going to get John Coltrane? It's going to be very expensive, or Miles Davis, or the top people in America to come out and tour Asia for, like, you know, a tiny slice of that. You could put together these other shredders who would play the, you know, covers. And so that's what he did. He put together bands and played all over Asia, and then he got into some other business. But and then all his brothers, there was three boys and two girls, and all three boys were all jazz musicians. And his brother Tony, actually, his entire working life, he made a living in America, mainly as a jazz musician playing live music, as a clarinetist, and was in the Musicians Union. And just, can you imagine just that you could actually, you know, make a living and retire with a pension, you know, and from being a jazz musician? I mean, it's incredible. But so that was kind of already in my blood, and their father was a musician. I think their grandfather, my great-grandfather, was back in Sicily. And so there's a whole line of musicians on my mother's side. And so I think it was just kind of, that kind of unfolded naturally, because I had this natural inclination to put together bands and to sort of make my vision come true. At the same time, I had all these, all these other imperfections and neuroses and emotional issues that, I mean, probably not any worse than a lot of the other band members, because, I mean, musicians are just archetypally screwed up. And so there was always conflicts going on and that kind of stuff. And so there was dysfunction. But then there was also the light side of it. There was my, yeah, there was a drive. There was, the whole thing with death metal was, I came out to California when I was 20 years old for something totally different with a friend, to work in a refinery, whose dad was working in a refinery. And just to make some money, 20 bucks an hour was what was offered. And it's like in 1990, I was 20 years old. It's like a lot of money. And I was like, I have nothing better to do in Austin. I had no band going on. And so I moved out there. Once I got out there, I realized, holy crap, I moved into the Bay Area, which was one of the biggest music scenes and metal music scenes in the whole world. And I went from Austin, Texas, which had no metal scene hardly, to the Bay Area. I would go to the guitar shops and I would see it wasn't Guitar Center at the time, but all these different music stores. And I would see on the bulletin boards massive amounts of ads for musicians. And they had Bay Area Music Magazine, and there was ads in there, and there was another couple of papers with ads. There's like metal musicians everywhere looking for each other. I was like, this is amazing. I can actually find band members now. And so I just started going in that direction. And I was playing in those days, I liked what they called progressive metal, which was Fate's Warning, Queensryche, of course, the British heavy metal bands, Maiden and Priest, and a Watchtower, which was from Austin, and other kind of progressive metal bands. And that was kind of what I was into. And I started playing with this guy named Ed McKeon, this drummer. And he was the one listening to death metal. He was playing Death and Pestilence and all of this in the van when we would drive to the practice unit. And I was like, what is this shit, man? What is this you're listening to? It's the vocals and everything. I was like, what the hell? And he was just like, oh man, this stuff is sick. And he knew the lyrics and all that. And then when I started hanging out with Aaron Strong back in Concord, Aaron was also into death metal. He was into Morbid Angel, like big time. And him and Mark Varian, they were really into it. And so I started hearing in these two, I practiced with Ed down in San Leandro, down by Oakland, and then I was roommates with Aaron Strong up in Concord. So I was hearing death metal from these two different directions. And I'm just starting to acquire a taste for it. And it finally clicked, kind of this style. It's like, everything is the extreme. Okay, the drums, this is the extremist, you could play drums. This is the most extreme, you could play guitar maybe. This is the most extreme, three-finger bass playing. And then this is the most extreme thing you could do with vocals. And once I kind of got that it's all about everybody doing the most extreme thing, then it kind of all fit together. And I started to acquire a taste for it, and then I started to fall in love with the style, and then it kind of emerged. I could actually see I could see the direction of where this was going, and I started playing those riffs, and I formed that band with Matt Entropy, and it just started going in that direction. And it happened to be that at the time, so death metal music just in the world was just now reaching its, it was starting to there was still, it probably, when did it start? Late 80s. But by mid 90s, it was really starting to get steam just in the world. And when I started playing that kind of music, I joined a movement that was rapidly getting more and more energy, and the Milwaukee Metal Fest was getting more and more crowded, and there was more little labels starting off, and there was more underground fanzines. There was more and more of this material coming out, and there was more and more excitement, and there was more people that were coming into the scene, and it was just like I joined. I actually could see, okay, I can play this style, I understand this style. And now I have musicians, and I liked the whole scene. Like, it started to unfold that there was the whole family, because it was death metal, it was underground, and it was like a family. And the whole thing just, even Juan was more into, like, Priest and Maiden and other stuff. And then he also kind of got addicted to the style. And once I kind of could see and feel, okay, I could have a death metal band, I could play Milwaukee Metal Fest, I could do that as a vehicle, as a movement, that just all started to click. It's kind of like, what if you had been introduced to cryptocurrencies, before Bitcoin came out, and you liked the idea of it and stuff, but then you just saw it building steam, and you started investing in it and stuff, and just imagine how it could just take you away. And it's like a movement. It just starts to build, and it's a cultural, energetic phenomenon, and it just sucks you into it, and then you snap into it. You're either a fan and you're going and watching all these bands, or you're a musician, and then you want to play the music. And so that situation, that formula, activated the band leader in me, the intergenerational band leader that was in me. And I just kind of, boom, I kind of just like, I'm going to do this. I can see this. I can see it happening. And when I was playing with Entropy, and we had Uranio playing drums, other guys like Skin Lab played right next to us, and they'd come over and they'd be like, damn, you guys shred. You guys are a good band. I mean, do you realize this? And your drummer shreds. And I was like, wow, okay, that's good. We're good. And he was, Steve and the guys at Skin Lab and others would come around and be like, you guys are good. I started to realize, well, maybe we're good. And then there's also this band called Thanatopsis that I was friends with, and they were like the premier death metal band. I started living with some of those guys, roommates with them, and just the whole thing, it was an organic thing where I feel like I kind of joined this movement and was able to play the style, and I was able to tune in to the zeitgeist, so to speak, into the ethos of extreme metal music. And then I was able to kind of look at musicians and go, could he do it? No, he can't do it. Could he do it? No, for these reasons, he can't do it. He's good at this, but he's got all these issues. No, okay, not him. And I just kind of started to look at people in other bands and be able to kind of judge. And then I would just approach them and, hey, or it was an instinctual thing. And I think once I kind of unconsciously clicked that I could be successful in this genre. I can make a really good band, and I can do something with my music in this genre. It is possible. And even though the musicians are kind of hard to find, it can be done. I can do it. And once that all kind of came together, then I sort of had this eagle eye about the whole thing. And I was just like, boom, I'm doing that. And I'm going to do that. And then it didn't come easy because there was all these people, there was all these circumstances and things were falling apart and all these back and forth and getting dumped off relapse and all this kind of stuff. But I just maintained that for a long time. And then I just added the sort of the band leader mentality. It's kind of like there's other talents in the music industry, like the talent of marketing or PR, right? And being able to, market a band, which is a whole other aesthetic, a whole other set of talents and sort of gut instincts that I don't have. And there are people, they can just, you got Rick Rubin or whatever, like the story of Rick Rubin. He's just this natural, just walks right into it, and he can envision where a band could go. He can see whether or not psychologically they're capable of handling success. He can see whether or not, whether they can fit into the zeitgeist, and he's able to just it's a certain talent. And some people have, or like your talent for playing lead guitar. It's like, I never could get, I always have problems with my technique and my posture and the way I hold my hand. I was constantly changing the way I picked, and I don't have very good vision, and I was just couldn't really, and the whole thing of being like a shredder guitar player, it worked for Aaron. It just didn't work for me. I could write songs and I could play good enough to be tight, enough in the recordings to where, I didn't sound unprofessional, but my main thing was writing songs and getting them into the world. And so everybody has different kind of innate talents, and that's kind of what happened with me. And this all just kind of unfolded naturally, organically, and I wasn't very conscious of how it was all working until now. I look back and I'm like, oh wow, and so yeah. But then with the professionalism part, last thing on that is that I don't know if this is inherited or if this is just, how obvious is it that you got 5 guys in the band, say, and you have practice on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday? How obvious is it that, you're a half hour or an hour late for band practice, 1 or 2 out of 3 times? How bad is that, where it becomes, everybody knows that so-and-so is going to be late for band practice? How long does it take for you to figure out, hey, wait a minute, God, I keep missing the train, or I keep having, it's just this lack of awareness of how you're interacting with the rest of the band. Or every time, we got to pitch in to do something with the band, you're the one guy that doesn't have any money. Or whatever. It just go on and on and on, or doesn't have any equipment and has to borrow equipment, or there's certain things that are so obvious that to be a professional musician, you would need to have these few things taken care of, these basic things taken care of. You would be, if you're writing new music, you would come to band practice having practiced the parts at home. If you, you would have equipment that works and sounds good. You would have a vehicle that doesn't break down all the time, or at least have some way of getting to practice that was reliable. I don't care if you take the bus or whatever. You would have some consciousness of all this and all kinds of other things. And it's it's amazing how so many musicians who are otherwise talented are not able to get out of themselves and have an objective view and say, I want to be professional, and this is what professionals do. So if the musician can't do that, then someone else, the band manager, has to do that. Somebody has to say, hey, bro, hopefully they can say it in a really nice way. And I didn't know how to do that in the early days. Hey, well, why don't you, you've been wearing the same T-shirt at band practice or in live shows for the last 6 live shows. You got any other T-shirts? Just whatever. Point out things that needed to be pointed out. And so somebody has to do that. And it's nice when you have an external person, a band manager who isn't in the band, so the band can still have a good relationship with, and let the bad cop be the manager who is telling everybody to get their act together. So, but I had to do that. And so I was able to do it, but I was also not the best at it. I mean, I was also, I also was, I had enough consciousness to know some basic stuff like I was talking about, but I didn't have enough consciousness to know how my approach, how my tone of voice, how my perfectionism was becoming neurotic and turning people off. So that I had to slowly learn over time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like some of the stuff you mentioned, there have been times I've been guilty of that. When I got in my late 20s, I got really tired of playing in bands for free. I just thought, like, I'm at a point where I need to start making money. If I'm going to be going to practice 3 times a week, going to play shows, I'm tired of this, like $50,
Right.
and then there'd be in bands I pull over and like everyone pitch in for gas. I'm like, I can't believe I'm still doing this at 28 and so I kind of have a different side of that where I get what you're saying, but there comes a point where it's like all the money we make goes back into the band and the merch.
Right.
It's like, that's not really practical when you get older. And it's like, I guess that's kind of, but on the, like I said, it kind of relates to what I was saying about how it's changed me as a person is when I have to do something for my band, I make sure that I'm the person I wish was running the bands I was in that was kind of just, making me do things and not compensating me for it. And so, like if I go on a tour of Sleep Terror, I'm going to pay my drummer and everybody really well, so much that they like we just did a video and it was kind of hard to get people together, but I'm like, hey man, I'll throw you a few $100 just one day. Let's go out and make this video. And, it'll be really easy. I'll, bring the van, I'll get the waters, I'll buy you food all day and boom, it's like, sure. But like, that's kind of one thing that I think I absorbed not only from my personal experience of being let down and used, but also from you. I think, it inspired me, when I did that tour with you, how you took control and you were just a good leader and you were, a good band leader and professional. And, and also, the fact that you flew all the way here to teach me the songs. Then like you hired a drummer from Europe. That must cost a fortune, but it's like, I'm just saying, like, it's interesting.
We ended up getting, that was the most financially successful tour Vile ever did. That 2004 American tour with Cannibal Corpse, because we sold more merch than I know we sold more merch than Exhumed, and I think we sold about as much as Hypocrisy, and we only got paid $100 a night. Yeah. So the $100 a night basically paid for the gas in the van. So I had that van, that long van, and that paid for the gas. And then the merch money paid for any hotels and paid you guys at the end and paid back Reno's plane tickets and all that. And people actually got paid. I think you made $800 at the end, if I remember right, which is okay. $800. You're on tour for a month, so I mean, and Matt, the bass player, got $1,400, something like that. Reno made the most because he had a fee. I think he charged $2,000 or euros. Actually, I think is he had set that for himself, and he was like, I'm not going to play for less than 2,000 euros. So you're gonna have to pay me that. So okay, and then I'd pay for his plane ticket, and then pay back the merch costs. And I think I myself ended up eating about, I think by paying all you guys, I think I ended up losing about $4,000. So, so the thing is I understand your perspective, and if this was, you know, Prince or, you know, whatever, you know, or Metallica, and we're talking about millions of dollars, or any kind of a level where you're actually making decent money, then I think the whole thing of bargaining and what's respectful, what's fair, what's feasible is in order. But I used to keep track of receipts and how much the band fund owed me. And I only kept that tally for like 5 years, and then it was like at 14, 15 grand the band fund owed me, and then I just went on from there. And so there was never any profit. The whole band is, I mean, when you average it all out, and if I had been borrowing money from an investor and was having to pay that person back, I mean, I'd go back and do the books on everything, and I would see that everything just went back into the band, or ultimately came out of my pocket, and so there just wasn't any money. I mean, it was like I wanted to treat people fairly, and I think I did. I think there's one outstanding debt I still have with one guy, and who we had a big argument about money, and he ended up saying, well, I just screw you and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, but every other person, it's not that much money. And every other person that's been in Vile, and there's been like 18, 20 people in the band. Every other person nobody has there's no outstanding debts with anybody else, or anyone. And so, but I mean, I understand the situation of especially if you're a musician and you're joining bands, and, you know, you're offering this service to them. And I think what you have to do is you have to be like Reno, and you have to just basically be like, this is what I play for, and you either pay that or I don't join. Mm-hmm. That's it. Yeah, and I mean, and so that's how he made it work, and it still wasn't that much. I mean, but it's enough for him to feel like he's being respected. So this is kind of the state of the situation with a lot of genres, especially underground genres. There just isn't any money. And so when everybody kind of takes this approach like, well, it's a family and we all got to take a loss together. And you're thinking, well, I've only been in the band a year or 6 months. And I'm like, I got to take a loss like you guys have to take a loss. And I mean, I understand the situation. There are a lot of examples, though. I do recognize there are a lot of examples where the band leader is ripping off the band fund, and therefore ripping off the other musicians.
George Clinton.
Yeah, exactly. And countless death metal bands too. There are all kinds of examples where the person who's the treasurer of the band, or the band manager, is basically telling the band members, oh, sorry guys, we didn't make that much. Sorry, you know, you're gonna have to this much for each, and that's it. It's all there is. But then meanwhile, that person's putting $5,000 in their pocket or whatever.
Yeah,
that's a problem.
They could also be You know, and I agree. Like, there's not a lot of money in metal bands and underground music and stuff, in a sense where you have to consider that. You know, like you play in a band, if you kind of weigh out how much you like the music, how much you enjoy it, and then do you want to keep, you know, uh, demanding more out of it? And it's just, but then there's some people, you know, they have that extra money and they're kind of spending it um, on other things that they could when they could be paying you. And I've had that happen too. And it's just
Oh yeah,
kind of, yeah.
it does happen. It does happen. I mean, I was at the time. You know, I don't usually talk about this, but I think it's safe. We're far enough away from it to where I can say that I was in a. I was growing weed. I was growing weed on the side, and had a hookup that where I could. I mean, I had. This is another very interesting sort of. Opportunity. So it just kind of, it's like this for the band Vile. It's like there was all this contamination, but then there was also this grace or opportunity that was afforded to us just from the cosmos. And one of those things was some people that I knew who were in this is in California when marijuana had been legalized for medicinal use. So when that happened, marijuana use and production sort of got decriminalized to a great degree, and there wasn't that much emphasis on stopping that kind of thing. And there was all kinds of people in California that were growing weed in their closets or in their backyards. And it was just like, this is 96, 7. But it hadn't been legalized. It's not like to the point of where it is now, like in Colorado or in Vancouver or wherever, Seattle, wherever. So the price was still high because technically it was still illegal. And so there was a very good profit margin if you could produce really good, high quality marijuana. And that's its own science. But I had some friends who were doing that, and I was able to get clones, they call it, from them. And I was able to start growing for extra money. And I didn't have a huge production, and then you also have to have a way of getting rid of it. And it's dangerous to be just sitting around just selling bags of weed to hundreds of people. But I had a couple people that would just buy it from me by the pound. So for several years, I did that on the side. And all the money that I made doing that went into the band. So that's how I could afford to pay for Reno. I mean, I was doing mastering and recording as officially, to make a living, and I was doing that, but that could only pay for the rent. And so where was the extra money going to come from to fly people to pay for these extra costs to do tours and stuff? And so that's where it was coming from. And then once the band got going, and then once I did that for several years, maybe up to 5 years. And then it was basically, there was more stories I could unwind, but what ended up happening was I got the message in a number of ways that this is an immature thing to do. It's immature to get into your 30s and to be growing weed. That's what I came to. There's a lot of people that are growing weed and they're in their 70s or whatever. But I just kind of came to, this is kind of cheating. This is kind of like, I should be putting all my energy into making my recording and mixing and mastering business, Imperial Mastering. I should be putting my energy into making my business do well. that's an adult thing to do. Growing weed, even though it's difficult and it requires a whole scientific kind of approach, is kind of a teenager thing to do. That's kind of what I came to for myself. And I said, this is all cool, and it's great that it funds the band and all that, but I can't do this. I can't do this. At some point I have to stop. And then there was a number of things that happened that made it just become clear to me that I'm done with this. And so I stopped doing that, and I suffered pretty badly for a couple of years because I hadn't been really feeding my business. I hadn't really been working on it. I didn't have enough clients to support myself. So I ended up having to sell gear and stuff that I had acquired and then get back up to speed. And so that was another thing is that I had a secondary source of funding for about half the time that Vial was active. And if I hadn't had that, there would have been, well, I don't know what I would have done. So it was just like, you know what I would have done is, well, I mean, maybe things would have worked out differently. I mean, like my friends in Origin, you know, those guys, they don't have any money. I mean, Paul and some of the other guys were working at Kentucky Fried Chicken, but you know what they did? They just toured like crazy. They just toured. They just got in the van and they just suffered through tour after tour after tour to build the name up to the point to where they would be invited to play festivals. They would be invited onto tours that were, you know, better than just opening or whatever. And so they just suffered that way. But I was able to be more choosy and kind of let the crappy tours go and just try to get on the good ones. And so, you know, this is like, you know, this is this is part of the story of this band and also of a lot of musicians who have to rely on some kind of side stream of income. Somebody has to pay for the costs of putting their band in the world. And truthfully, there was no need. If I had had 5 band members who would all equally, who would approach the band like a family commitment, I wouldn't have needed that money. Because what was happening is I was paying for band members, whether they were hired band members or people in the band that just didn't have any money or just wouldn't commit. If I had had 5 band members that were willing to just, you know, pay 1/5 of the costs, we could have all done that together without any extra funding. But in my case, that was the only way to make it work. And so and it was just like an opportunity that showed up. So that was another kind of input into the band as to how I got it going. And now actually that in that business, that, you know, in the marijuana production business, that whole thing is gone now. Now it's just like these huge growers, and the costs of doing it are so high compared to the price has gone down so much. It's not a good business anymore. That's been ruined. So it was like another thing where I kind of got in at the right time and got out before it crashed.
Speaking of mastering, I wanted to ask you how has that changed? Because you've been doing this for about 20 years or so now, and how is that, you know, with the advancement of technology and just people recording at home now and computers and stuff, how have you seen that process change, and just how has it affected your business?
Ruined it. So mastering was always kind of an elite thing, and mastering was kind of an elite thing, and there weren't that many mastering engineers, mastering studios around. When I got into it, had moved into the like recording studios also went through this. Recording equipment was very bulky and expensive, and took hundreds of thousands of dollars at least to put together a good recording studio. The bigger ones in the millions. But then we moved into the realm of project studios. After companies like Mackie started making these small mixers, and then Alesis came out with the ADAT recorder, digital recorder. Even though they were expensive at the time, like $3,500 maybe for 8 tracks. Well, you could buy 2 of those for $7,000, and then they came down very quickly. You could buy 2 of those for like $4,000 or $5,000, and that would be a whole recording studio right there, and a Mackie console, which would cost you, for literally $10,000 or $12,000, you could put together a whole recording studio, and you could just run it out of your house. Yes, you had to study acoustics, you had to study all these, the art of recording. But got something in my tooth here. It was possible. And so the rise of the project studio, which came out of the technology, the evolution of the technology, that started to put pressure on the traditional recording studios. And now, instead of having, let's say in California, 30 recording studios in the whole state or something, like good ones, then now there's 300. And the same thing happened to mastering a little bit later on. So mastering became something that, an equalizer, 2-channel equalizer, $10,000, $12,000 for one piece of equipment. It moved from that to eventually, I got in, I bought a high-end EQ used, but now that equalizer, like the one I had, the GML 9500, which is like one of the top ones, that equalizer, it's unbelievable. I've replaced that equalizer is a very clean sounding equalizer with a digital plug-in that sounds as good, because most of our source material is digital. If my source material was analog coming off of tapes, I would still want that EQ. But because all source material is digital pretty much now, I've got a plug-in that's $100. And that $100 plug-in is as good and as clean as that $12,000 equalizer. And that has happened in all over the place. The technology is to the point to where you could actually, even though I would not do mastering wholly in the computer, I have analog equipment as well, but you could do a very good job mastering, equally as good as what anybody was doing back in the 90s, with just a laptop and $300 worth of plugins. So now that does not mean that, okay, first of all, you shouldn't do that unless you have to a great degree, mastering depends on the monitoring situation. And so you have to have high-end monitors, and you have to have a room that isn't full of anomalies. Mm-hmm. But even now, I have a pair of near-field monitors that, my mastering speakers, my big ones are these big Dunleavy speakers, but I got a pair of near-field monitors from JBL. I think they're called the 306s. The something or other 306s are probably made in China. And I know they have built-in amplifiers, 6-inch woofer, ported, but they have some kind of DSP program in there that's like in real time dealing with anomalies, with deficiencies in the system. And I think you can master. I have other sources, but if I only had those, I could master professionally on those speakers. And I don't think I could compete with Bob Ludwig, but I could master, if I had the talent, with $300 worth of plugins and these two speakers, which are $200 each or $250 each or something. I could master in a decent room with that if I had the skills. And so the equipment has made it so that this is not elite anymore. This is not an elite thing. And even though every mastering engineer will tell you that just because you have the equipment, even if you're a rich kid and you bought all the equipment, doesn't mean that you can do the job. But a mixing engineer, who normally in the old days would send all his stuff out to be mastered because he doesn't have the equipment and he is, psychologically screwed up from working on the album for all this time, and he needs an outside objective listener. It's very tempting because the engineer has the equipment, the mixing engineer, the recording engineer has the equipment to do his own mastering now. And he can check his thing in the car and everything and let the band members check it. And if it sounds good, check it up against other CDs. If he's talented, he can do a pretty good job of mastering, and he doesn't really need that outside person. And that has now made it so that I'd say most mastering is done by the mixing engineer, and they don't call me or any other outside engineer anymore, especially in underground music. I don't think that's the smartest thing to do, because I always, when I work with the mixing engineer, I always end up saying, hey man, what do you think about, turning the vocal up a couple dB? Oh, really? You think so? Yeah, here's a test master. Here's what it sounds like with the vocal up a little bit. Oh yeah, I did. I checked it back in my car, and I think you're right. I think the vocal does need to go up a couple dB. I'm going to do that to all the songs before I send you all the mixes. If I hadn't have been there, he would have mastered it himself, and everybody would have liked the CD, but everybody would have also known that the vocal was a little too quiet. And that would have been avoided if he had called a competent mastering engineer. Now, I can understand if it would cost too much money, and they're just like, we don't have the budget for that. But it's at the point now where somebody like me, you can get a whole album mastered by me if you prepare it well enough on your end, so where I don't have to pull my hair out over it. You can get it done for $400, $500 at the most, but even $400. So a band that's just spent however many several $1,000s mixing, I mean, it's like, again, back to, hey guys, everybody pull $100 more out of your pocket. Let's get this guy to master it. But how many albums do I have to do at $400 each to pay the bills? So that's why I still have to keep all my costs. I'm in a property right now that's not my property. And so I have very, very few bills. And so I am still able to make it work as a mastering engineer. But the whole industry is just, I mean, we could go on and on about the industry and about downloading, and now with the whole COVID thing, with touring and all of this, I mean, the music industry has been, for a number of reasons, just completely just ravaged.